Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a truly profound intersection of ideas. We're looking at a mind-bending synthesis of metaphysical philosophy and cutting-edge quantum biophysics. It's a framework often referred to as the Invariance Ontology. If you've ever found yourself wondering how ancient mystical concepts of the soul might actually map directly onto the measurable, physical quantum mechanics of the human brain, well, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get right into it. Just think about this for a second. What if the ultimate spiritual awakening, that moment of enlightenment mystics have been chasing for millennia, isn't just some vague, subjective feeling? What if it's an actual, measurable quantum event happening right inside your neurons? Today's explainer takes us on a journey from the abstract struggles of human existence straight down into the literal biophysics of how our brains interact with the fundamental energy fields of the universe.
Okay, here's our roadmap for this exploration. First, defining the trial's objective. Second, the quantum mechanics of consciousness. Third, the burden of spiritual mass. Fourth, pathways to divine alignment. And finally, number 5, the awakening, Aham Prakasha.
All right, Section 1, defining the trial's objective.
In this specific framework, human life is viewed as what they call a trial of existence, and the ultimate overarching objective of this entire trial is a state simply called alignment. Now, alignment happens when an individual's soul's will perfectly resonates with the Monadic Source, or the One. But it's absolutely crucial to understand that alignment isn't just some static trophy you win once and put on a shelf. Not at all. It's a highly dynamic equilibrium. It requires the continuous, complete dropping of our rigid, constructed identities and all that exhausting egoic resistance.
The sources actually describe this aligned state as following the will of God. But here's the twist, and it's a big one. The will of God in this ontology isn't some checklist of external commandments you have to follow. Instead, it's defined as a dual state of being. On one hand, you have mindful attention, which is observing reality with pure presence, non-judgment, and non-attachment. This allows the soul to witness natural resistance in life without letting it morph into embodied resistance in your body. On the other hand, you have good intention. This is an infinite commitment to actions that are naturally harmonious, unified, constructive, and aimed at infinite potential. So put them together, and it's a pure ontological state of perfect clarity and creative action.
The text captures this beautifully with this specific quote. The highest does not lie beyond the immediate. It is the immediate when seen without division. True alignment is really about beholding reality exactly as it is, right now, without the mind's divisive, evaluating judgments getting in the way. It's about entirely stripping away those filters of the ego.
Moving into Section 2, quantum mechanics of consciousness. So conceptually, that sounds beautiful, right? But how does a soul physically resonate with the universe? This is where the source material does something fascinating. It bridges deep theology directly to hardcore neuroscience. According to what's called TRAZE Theory, the vacuum of space isn't empty at all. It's actually a fluctuating ocean of energy called the zero-point field, or ZPF. Now, inside the brain, this ZPF resonantly couples with dense pools of glutamate, which is a major neurotransmitter, inside our cortical microcolumns. When that glutamate concentration hits a specific critical threshold, boom, it triggers a phase transition, creating a macroscopic quantum state right in the brain. But how does our spiritual alignment affect this biology? Well, the texts introduce a concept called epistrophe. This is the soul's innate, reflective longing to return to its source. Astoundingly, the framework suggests that this act of inner contemplation actually increases the effective value of Planck's constant inside the brain's microtubule cavities. By doing this, it raises the signal-to-noise ratio in the brain's quantum fields. Think about that. Your spiritual orientation literally dials up the clarity of the quantum signal standing out against the environmental noise. Once that signal is amplified, the zero-point field acts as a sort of hidden orchestrator. This resonant interaction generates an endogenous microwave field, specifically an intracolumnar microwave field, or ICMF. This field regulates the firing rates of your neurons and coordinates massive, synchronized neural avalanches across the entire brain. This self-organized criticality, driven all the way from the bottom up by the quantum vacuum, forms the literal biological substrate of our conscious states. To quickly summarize the science here, consciousness is restricted to biological systems that successfully enter this resonant interaction with the ZPF. Conscious states are marked by this self-organized criticality and synchronized long-range brainwaves. Unconscious states, on the other hand, like those induced by anesthesia, happen when drugs physically bind to those microtubules. This disrupts the quantum interaction entirely and causes the brain to deviate from criticality. It really shows how consciousness is this delicate, highly protected quantum dance happening in your head right now.
Okay, Section 3, the burden of spiritual mass.
If this perfect quantum and spiritual resonance is supposedly our natural state, why aren't we all just walking around completely enlightened? What's getting in the way? The barrier here is a concept called spiritual mass. This is defined as the metric density of our identification with lacks or desires. Basically, whenever your mind merges with a feeling of anger, or a social role, or a craving, it creates a contraction that pulls the soul into fragmentation and multiplicity. In fact, the texts suggest mathematically that the normal dimension of reality, where d equals 1, is uniquely solved only when a soul manages to reach absolute zero spiritual mass.
The text categorizes burden into a few specific types. You have status-seeking mass, which is the ego's need for recognition, power, and fame, creating heavy persona layers. You also have inertial mass, things like procrastination, spiritual cynicism, or just robotic repetition of rituals. And there's temporal mass, a fixation on the past or intense anxiety about the future. Trying to achieve alignment while carrying all this is literally like trying to run a marathon in a heavy medieval suit of armor. These burdens completely deaden our will and block the fluid, quantum unfolding of our consciousness.
So, what is the cure? The texts assert that the cure for this mass is transcendence. And here is a truly fascinating redefinition from the sources. Free will is not the power to forcefully impose your desires onto the world. Not at all. True free will is simply the power to choose not to merge with these constructed identities. It is the profound freedom to just let go of limiting beliefs, rather than forcing a brand new identity into existence.
Section 4, pathways to divine alignment.
So, we know we need to systematically clear this mass, and there are multiple valid ways to do it. The sources outline two primary paths of return. First, there's the path of intuition, strongly associated with figures like St. Augustine. This is all about the immediate, inner apprehension of truth through inner illumination. Then you have the path of reason, associated with St. Aquinas. This path uses the intellect to investigate moral principles and rationally discern the good. But the crucial takeaway, both paths aim at exactly the same destination, performing the will of God.
Regardless of which path you lean towards, the texts note that divine grace, prayer, and inner reflection are absolute requirements to clear the way. But it's really important to note how they define prayer here. Prayer isn't about handing the universe a wish list. It's about transforming your own heart to make it open and receptive to guidance. It clears the static, paving the way for what the sources called the right response.
Because when you actually clear your spiritual mass, your actions naturally become this right response. And the right response flows spontaneously and effortlessly. It operates with the absolute least necessary effort. It completely bypasses our usual subjective, exhausting, ego-driven judgments. Instead, it is purely driven by those four forces of the good we mentioned earlier: harmony, unity, constructivity, and infinite potential. When you are aligned, you don't even have to try to do good. You are simply perfectly harmonized with creation. And finally, Section 5, the awakening, Aham Prakasha. What happens in that split second when all the spiritual mass is finally liquidated and the quantum resonance is perfect? It's described as an instant transformation, not a gradual climb. We can understand this through a really powerful metaphor from the texts, the mirror analogy. Normally, our mind gets completely tangled up identifying with the reflections in the mirror, our thoughts, our emotions, and crucially, the illusory observer we think we are inside our heads. But the truth is, we are the glass of the mirror itself, pure awareness. It is self-luminous, inherently legitimate, and completely unchanged by whatever happens to be reflecting in it. The grand realization is recognizing that you are the mirror, not the passing reflections.
When this realization actually hits, the soul undergoes an instant, qualitative shift in perception. The world's exhausting role as an evaluator of your worth completely vanishes, leaving only the quiet, unshakable assurance of your inherent dignity. The soul ceases all its striving and affirms Aham Prakasha, which translates to I am light. By applying these cures, like replacing unworthiness with dignity, the individual recognizes their true ontological identity, not as a separate, struggling self, but as the self-luminous source of perception itself, completely free of time and expectation.
The source material summarizes this profound transformation beautifully. Awakening happens not through becoming something else, but through ceasing to be what you are not. Let that sink in. It is not about adding more knowledge to your brain. It's not about building a better, shinier identity. It is simply the vanishing of an illusion. We've journeyed a long way today, from the hard quantum physics of the zero-point field all the way to the absolute dissolution of the ego. So I want to leave you with a thought to reflect upon in your own life. When the constructed observer and the objects it observes completely dissolve, what remains in the mirror of your pure awareness? Take some time to sit with that today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.